So there's a lot of what you'll see about feeding starter will say like discard half of it and then feed it like 1 to 1 to 1. I wanted to let you know, like, it actually can be a whole lot easier than that. I don't ever keep more than just drippings of starter. You don't have to have the same amount that you're going to be feeding. It just needs to be less. It can't be more or you'll weaken the starter, right? So when well, right now I have a big old jar of starter because that's what I was using in December when I was making all that bread. And then I've just kind of kept that big jar. But normally I keep a jar with just scrapings of a jar, like 30 to 50 grams of starter, not very much at all. And then I feed it what I would need for 2 loaves worth. So I feed it 150 grams of flour and 150 grams of water, added to that maybe 30 to 50 grams of leftover starter, and stir it all together, let it set until it gets bubbly, and then usually put it in the fridge. I also, as long as it's not like very hungry with like hooch on top of it, the dark liquid, I still use my starter when it's hungry. It's fine because basically when you're, as long as it's not still eating, you feed it and then it bubbles up and the yeast basically multiplies through the starter, right? And so it may not be quite as active when if it's been sitting for a few days in the fridge, but it's hungry, right? So when you put it in your bread, it's ready to bubble and like it's ready to eat when you feed it to the bread, when you put it in the bread. So like basically, anyway, hungry starter still works just fine to make bread. So if I feed my starter and then I don't get to make bread that weekend, I might leave it till the next weekend in the fridge, not on the counter, because if you leave it, it'll start to mold if it doesn't have something to eat, to keep it active. But if you put it in the fridge, you can, I mean, I've even done 2 or 3 weeks probably. That's probably pushing it. After several weeks, it might start like getting watery. When it gets that water on top, it's pretty acidic. So you need to, feed it. But I just thought I would let you know that because I don't ever really have to discard and throw away starter. So I was in the beginning, I was doing it like they tell you to do in a lot of the groups, but there are other people that will tell you like the drippings or the jar scrapings method. You'll see that some places. And that's what I do because it makes it so much easier instead of having to like feed, discard, feed, discard, feed, discard, and you're throwing away all the starter, or you feel like you're wasting it, or whatever. I just save just enough that's like basically the scrapings of the jar, and it takes a little bit longer whenever you feed it, but not really. Like I really don't even notice it taking longer. And I read that it's because the yeast multiplies like exponentially. Like basically, Apollo, stop. The yeast that is, if there's a little bit of yeast that's going to multiply into this much, feed, it's not going to take that much longer than if you had a lot of yeast, because it's like, anyway, I don't feel like I can explain that very well without like paper and pencil, but, yeah, I feel like, it sometimes gets to be made harder than what it is. And you also can use hungry starter and it's totally fine.